Everybody wants to know how to lower their cloud bill, but that's not the right question. The right question is who owns what you're spending, not who monitors it, not who reports on it. Who owns it with enough accountability that when that number moves, something actually happens. Most organizations can't answer that. They've got dashboards, they've got FinOps tooling, they've even got real-time visibility into the spend, and yet the bill hasn't moved because visibility and ownership, those are two different things, completely different things. WWT's Cloud Parties research frames this as Party 3, the convergence of FinOps and technical business management, or TBM. Not because the tools don't work, but because without the accountability structure underneath them, the tools are just surfacing a number that nobody is responsible for changing. That's the problem that this episode tackles. And according to the research, it's now a prerequisite for everything else your organization is trying to do in cloud. Well, I'm Robb Boyd, and this is Worldwide Technology Presents Research. This is episode 3 of the Cloud Priorities series, building on the infrastructure and application modernization work we did in Priority 2. Today's episode is about who owns what that foundation costs. Jack French is AVP of Cloud Practice at Worldwide Technology, leading strategy and execution across their full cloud portfolio. Darryl Monroe is a cloud pre-sale specialist at WWT, working hands-on with organizations every day, trying to build the FinOps discipline that can match their cloud ambition. Here's where most of those conversations actually start.
FinOps, it's really about maximizing business value of the cloud, or at least that's where it began, right? When the FinOps Foundation was founded, not just shrinking the overall bill. Cloud, optimization is part of it, but it's really 20% of the overall picture. What I find most universally is that customers come to us with a cost problem. They might say it's FinOps, they might say it's cost optimization, but at the end of the day, they're coming to us with cost overruns. And when we start to dig in, we find that the cost is actually a symptom, and that symptom of the larger problem being that nobody owns the cloud spend. There's no connection between what's being spent and what business outcome it's producing, and there's no operating model underneath it.
20%. That number has a way of landing hard in rooms where cost optimization is the entire agenda. The research is equally direct. Cost optimization is not FinOps. It's one component of it. And the more important finding is the second one. The cost isn't the problem. Nobody owning the cost, that's the problem. That's not a technology failure, it's an organizational one. And the scale of it tends to surprise people.
We had a customer recently come to us wanting to cut their AWS cloud bill. And when we dug in, started to uncover that roughly 40% of their spend didn't have an owner at all. And we all know you can't optimize what nobody owns.
40% unowned, not unmonitored, unowned. Monitoring tells you the number. Ownership means somebody has to explain it. The ownership gap didn't appear from nowhere. 2 separate frameworks were built to address it, and they came from different worlds, designed for different cost structures. And that context matters for understanding why bringing them together is harder than it sounds.
TBM, Technology Business Management, is a framework for mapping technology spend to business outcomes at its core. And it's been around for a long time. And you think of IT asset management or IT financial management, I think in organizations, large organizations, they've been looking at managing all of the technology assets and spend that they have for quite some time, way before cloud was around. FinOps was born from cloud spend, aiming really to do the same thing. How can we take all of this cloud spend and map it to business outcomes? But with FinOps, the spend is so different from what traditional IT environments were used to managing in TBM that a new methodology was created.
2 methodologies built to solve the same underlying problem, connecting technology spend to business outcomes for 2 fundamentally different cost structures. Now, the research identifies convergence as Party 3 specifically because of what's happened to the urgency. The urgency comes from a structural shift most finance organizations weren't built to absorb. When capital expenditures was the model, planning had teeth. The cost was committed before anybody flipped a switch. The depreciation schedule was fixed. The fiscal year made sense. Cloud dissolved that structure And most organizations are still running the old planning cycles inside the new cost model.
Traditional organizations were used to capital expenditure, workforce, licensing agreements that are cyclical, and we have these known dates that things are going to happen. I've got a depreciation schedule for these big cap expenses. I know what's going to happen throughout the year. And then here comes cloud, and I am looking in the rearview mirror every month to see what did I just spend, because it's consumption-based bill that throughout the month is going up and down, and I don't really have a handle of it until the end of the month, and I'm looking back. Where you really start to gain momentum and be able to make more informed decisions is when you deploy proper FinOps methodologies in your organization, where now I'm able to forecast properly. I do know what's going to happen in my cloud spend, and I'm no longer just waiting and cringing, waiting for that bill to hit me at the end of the month.
The cringe is real. Anyone who's managed cloud spend without FinOps maturity has felt it. That specific anxiety of not knowing what you're about to see when the invoice loads. Organizations that built the discipline solved it. They learned to forecast, to see spend coming before it arrived. But then, before most of them had really fully built that muscle, the pressure doubled. AI did to cloud what cloud did to capital expenditure, but faster and with higher peaks. And it split the problem in two.
If I'm an executive and I'm trying to determine if a project that I'm deploying, an AI project that I'm deploying in my organization is effective, the ROI is what I expect, but the spend exists on-prem and maybe a large capital expenditure with bursting into the cloud, do I have visibility into that full landscape? Or am I going to talk to a cloud center of excellence to get their FinOps reports and going to talk to my finance team to get their TBM dashboards? Or is there a central view that I can look to see the entire cost of this project that I've deployed, so I can make an informed decision to say, yes, proceed, or don't proceed, because now I know exactly what it costs.
That central view, the one that doesn't require an executive to stitch together two separate reports from two separate rooms, that's what most organizations don't have yet. And the stakes of getting it built have changed, because what's filling those rooms now is different than anything FinOps was originally designed to track.
Prior to AI, right? You might have a forgotten EC2 instance or maybe an oversized RDS database. They can be expensive, but they're slow burns, right? When you start getting into token costs and GPU inference, those are things that can spike instantly based on usage patterns that nobody had predicted, right? So you're not dealing with just a steady drip of maybe an oversized resource for 1, 2, 3 months. You're dealing with something that can really go vertical overnight. And if you don't have the proper foundation in place, right? Like real-time visibility, guardrails, you're going to continue to just find out after the fact.
The spend risk is real. So is the executive pressure to move on AI. And inside that tension, every project lead and engineering team is making their own trade-off.
Pressure in this space is absolutely making decision-making worse. You've got leadership asking engineering teams to adopt AI yesterday. And at that point, governance starts to feel like it's doing nothing but slowing things down, right? So teams tend to skip it, spin up the resources that they need, they move fast, and then the financial consequences show up after the fact, right? So when it comes to responsible urgency, doesn't necessarily have to imply slow urgency. We're not putting the brakes on. It's just about doing 3 or 4 non-negotiable things before you move fast, right? So making sure that, hey, whatever spend is going to be surfaced, it's tied back to an owner. Making sure that resources are tagged so that they're visible. Making sure that there's a budget threshold that triggers an alert before it becomes a crisis, right? All of that is maybe a day's worth of work. And the organizations that do that can move just as fast as the ones that don't. They're just not going to get ambushed by the bill at the end of the month, right? And the organizations that choose to skip the governance conversation, I would argue they're not actually moving faster, right? They're just deferring the cost of the decision to a later point in time.
Well, at this point, the picture is reasonably clear. The cost problem isn't a cost problem. It's an ownership problem. AI made that problem exponentially more urgent. And the organizations that take it seriously, that choose the governance foundation even under pressure, that commit to responsible urgency over speed, Those organizations have something. They have a mandate. They have tooling. They have dashboards. They have tagging. And then, in more cases than you might expect, nothing changes.
Without executive support and alignment, these types of initiatives fall apart pretty quickly because you're essentially asking all the engineering, application teams, IT, finance, operations. There's so many different teams that have to play a part in this and be bought in to committing to this strategy of visibility of cost across all these different areas. And that's extremely difficult to mandate when people have day jobs and there's all these other things that they're managing in their life without executive support and mandate. And so I think it's got to come from the top. So the executive team needs to understand what the benefits are of going through something like this.
The mandate gets the table set. What happens at that table is a different problem because before any automation runs, someone has to define what it's automating.
The technology of building the automation for the tags is time and energy and smart people. But who's taking the time in front of that to build the overall organizational policy on how we're going to deploy this, what the convention will be, and standardize it across all those different areas of technology is I think the most difficult part for me. I would say it's that organizational alignment.
Organizational alignment before the tooling. Policy before automation. The research treats this sequencing as critical because you can't automate a convention that nobody has agreed on. Get the sequencing right and the organization has something real. Clean tags, real-time dashboards, spend allocated by team. And that's where most rollouts stop to declare victory.
Visibility without accountability is just reporting. I've walked into countless organizations that have beautiful dashboards. They've got the real-time spend visibility. They've got clean tagging, cost allocated down by team. But the savings opportunities and the recommendations are just sitting there, typically weeks old at best, and nobody actioned them, right? And when you start to dig into why, it almost always comes back to the same thing: ownership without consequence. Somebody's technically responsible for the cloud spend, but there's no mechanism that really makes them feel it. So the FinOps team might send a weekly digest, engineering acknowledges it, nothing happens, rinse and repeat. You can have perfect visibility with zero accountability and nothing's going to change inside the organization. And it's important to distinguish that no tool completely fixes that. There are tools out there that have some automation capabilities built in, but at the end of the day, you actually need a human being involved in the loop that actually cares about it.
Rinse and repeat. That's not a bug. That's the system working exactly as designed when accountability exists in name, but not in consequence. The tools surface the information. They don't create the accountability. And building the accountability piece isn't a configuration problem. It's an organizational one with a roadmap and a timeline most organizations aren't prepared for. WWT's entry into these engagements rarely comes through a governance conversation. The call comes in through a different door.
A lot of times it starts with an organization realizing that they feel like they're spending too much in a certain area, or there's some anxiety because they don't know what this spend is. And so you start digging in and you realize maybe that there's spend that hasn't been properly allocated to a business unit. And so we've got this shadow spend somewhere that we've got to go first identify who it belongs to, what it was spun up for. And that starts to unpeel more and more layers of, well, how was it deployed without visibility in the first place? What is your methodology around infrastructure and resource deployment? And as you work from that initial issue back, you realize that there probably wasn't ever centralized governance and operations set up. And then we start getting into that people and process part of it.
One shadow spend line traces back to the absence of centralized governance. That's the typical entry point. From there, the research outlines what a realistic path forward actually looks like. And realistic is the operative word.
A first assessment can be done within 4 to 6 weeks, which gives you an idea of where they're at from maturity level. Now, actually enacting change and rolling out organizational policy and governance, depending on the size of the company and the complexities, it could be, you're talking about a year-long engagement. This isn't something that you come in, you do it once and you walk away. It has to be something that you're committing to as an organization to stay on top of. Your policy is living and breathing. The practice of cost management is living and breathing. And so it's something that those dedicated resources are going to be working on and iterating on for quite some time. Worldwide offers a FinOps as a service capability because it's something that we realize most organizations aren't ready to manage today, and they just need people in there working with them day in and day out to get this properly deployed.
This isn't about dropping a report on your desk and walking away. It's a structured engagement designed to build your internal muscle, walking you from day one to the point where your team can own the steering wheel. And this framing matters because the temptation in any optimization effort is to jump straight to the recommendations, surface the waste, act on it, call it done. But the danger of the quick fix in cloud is it's rarely a fix at all. It's more of a high-interest loan. If you only treat the symptom without building the capability to manage it, you're just scheduling a return visit to the same problem.
We can certainly come in, throw a tool at your environment, see what recommendations come up, and put together a statement of work and take action on those recommendations, right? But if you don't get to the root of the problem, we're going to be having the same conversation 6-9 months down the road, right? So we're really trying to educate our customers on their cost overruns being a symptom of the accountability problem. The FinOps as a service is designed to walk them through that program, one step at a time, because customers aren't going to go from zero FinOps to a run across every domain and category overnight, right? You're talking minimum 12 months, likely up to a 3-year-long engagement before this just becomes an operational muscle internally.
I know how that sounds, but here's the alternative. Every month without this foundation is another month of deferred costs, unowned spend, and AI bets made on data that, it doesn't add up. WWT's position in this is worth understanding because WWT isn't a FinOps vendor that learned traditional IT. In fact, it's the other way around.
The ATC evolved over the last several years into having an area called the AI Proving Ground, where we're doing exactly that, where we're not only building different use cases that clients can test, but we're also model testing and showing what organizations would look like and what are the cost effectiveness of each of these different types of environments. So, yeah, Jim Kavanaugh, our executive, invested I think it was $500 million initially into expanding the ATC to have the AI Proving Ground as an area in it to address exactly what you just mentioned.
We started with a question. Who owns what you're spending? It sounds simple. Every organization has someone responsible for the cloud bill. Every organization has someone running TBM dashboards. But those two conversations are usually happening in separate rooms, in separate languages, with no shared framework for connecting them to the business outcomes that the spending is supposed to produce. The research is specific about what building that bridge requires. 4 to 6 weeks to understand where you actually stand, a year of organizational change before the governance holds, longer before it becomes reflex. But the payoff is a real answer to the question, not a dashboard approximation. Every dollar tagged, every resource owned, every AI initiative with a cost structure that someone is accountable for. The convergence of FinOps and TBM is Party 3 in WWT's Cloud Parties research for a specific reason. Everything that came before it, the infrastructure refresh, the application modernization, the AI investment, those generate costs. This is the practice that determines whether you know what those costs are actually buying you. Now, the research is available, of course, at WWT.com. If you can't answer that first question yet, who owns what you're spending? Well, that's where you need to start. I'm Robb Boyd. Thanks for watching. Worldwide Technology Presents Research.